I listen to a lot of music, and when I say a lot of music, I mean a lot of music. Like if I'm not working on music or having a conversation, I'm probably listening to music. And one thing that I've really noticed over the years of something that separates a fantastic song that I really resonate with, opposed to a song that's pretty good but just lacks a little bit of something that I can't grab onto, is the lack of special moments and ear candy. So when I'm listening to a song, I love when things happen once or twice. I love when something can pull out and grab my attention towards a certain lyric or phrase or melody. And if it lacks that, I just find some songs to be kind of stale and boring and one-dimensional. So in the tutorial today, I want to talk about creating special moments within your songs or productions or arrangements using some common ear candy techniques, things like creating tension with risers, emphasizing impacts with extra hits, things like highlighting moments in your song with silence, creating dynamics with filtering and special effects, all kinds of really cool stuff that you can use inside of your songs to make sure that that listener is really grabbing on and feeling like they're connecting with it, and it's kind of keeping their attention throughout the song. So we're going to dive into Cubase and check all of that out in 1 minute. But before we do, I'm Austin. You're watching Make Pop Music, where we have weekly tutorials about music and music production. If you like this video, please make sure you like, comment, and subscribe at the end of the video. And after the video, if you want to support the channel, you can head over to makepopmusic.com and check out all of our free and paid content over there. We really appreciate it. But let's hop into Cubase so I can show you how to create some special moments within your song using ear candy. Let's start with probably the most basic thing you can do to add excitement and special moments to your song, and that is creating tension with risers. So any kind of riser could be like a reverse synth, a reverse vocal, risers or cymbal swells that you find in a pack. These are things that really just kind of help bring in transitions and let the listener know that something new is going to be coming up or something important is coming up. So let me just show you what this song sounds like without any risers or hits or any of the ear candy stuff that we're going to talk about. For the risers, let's go ahead and go to the intro. By the way, this song is called The Rest of Me by Riley. So if you like it, you can click the link in the description and listen to the full song after this tutorial. But let's listen to what the intro going into the verse sounds like without any of these extra risers or reverse swells or anything like that.
I've been going silent on the west side. You already know.
To me, it just feels like it kind of comes in really abruptly. So what I like to do is to kind of transition between certain areas of the song. I'm going to use things like cymbal swells, risers, synth hits that I reverse out just to kind of introduce something swelling in. So right now we have a reverse exhaust from a Cashmere pack, and it looks like this synth hit that I've printed with a bunch of reverb and reversed. Let's listen to how this can already create a totally different tone and atmosphere going into that verse.
I've been going silent on the...
You can hear immediately that that's totally different than this. So using things like that can really help you throughout the song. There are a bunch of different risers and hits and things like that. We'll look at hits in 1 second, but another example of a riser that could create tension is doing a reverse vocal, where you basically take a vocal, you add a bunch of reverb and you print that, and then you just reverse it into itself. So we have this.
Yeah.
It really just adds a little bit of pizzazz into your production or into your mix.
Free time. Yeah.
Where if we took out that reverse vocal and that riser, this is going to sound, again, a little bit stale and boring.
Free time. Yeah. If you know.
We want those things to kind of cue a listener in and let them know that something new is coming up, something exciting is coming up, something that you're going to want to pay attention to is coming up. And risers, to me, is like the quickest way to let them know that that's going to happen. We have another one right here.
It's probably about the time you tell me goodbye. You felt it from...
So using risers into like a moment of silence or into a drum fill or into a down hit on a one, that can be a huge thing. So something as simple as adding in these like little effects that you find or that you print out can definitely make sure that you are adding a little bit of dynamics and keeping your listeners' attention. The second thing that I want to talk about is once you have that tension with those risers, you're probably going to want to emphasize the impact that's going to come in after that. And I like using things like down hits, tonal hits, synth patches that I put a ton of reverb on and just play one single note. These are things that as soon as the next area comes in, it's going to sound night and day different. So the biggest example I can show you is probably the chorus. Let's go ahead and listen to what the chorus sounds like if we don't have any down hits, no cymbal hits, no nothing. Here it is with the reverses, but nothing on the one.
It's probably about the time you tell me goodbye. You felt it from the start of me breaking your heart. I wish you'd find it.
You can tell that it just lacks a little bit of like intensity. It lacks a little bit of oomph when that chorus comes in. And so what I like doing is kind of layering hits. So I'll have like a big hit like this that is kind of bright, but it's really adding that transient punch. And then a lot of the time I'll do like a washy hit like this. Some kind of like white noise or exhaust or something like that. And then sometimes I'll even add in extra crashes. Layer that up with an orchestral crash. And so for all of them, I'm getting this nice big impact hit. And then that reverse synth that we just talked about a second ago, this is what that sound sounded like originally. You can see right here. It's literally just a synth hit that I've added a ton of stuff on: doubler, decapitator, Pro Q doing some band passing, and then Valhalla Vintage Verb, pretty wet, adding a bunch of space and room. So here's what this sounds like now. And having a singular tonal note like that come in on the one can really just emphasize the synth line or the melody line. And then when you print that and reverse that, you have this cool little transition. And now let's hear what the chorus sounds like with these reverses and these hits.
It's probably about the time you tell me goodbye. You felt it from the start of me breaking your heart.
Versus if we had this.
It's probably about the time you tell me goodbye. You felt it from the start of me breaking your heart. I wish.
I mean, that's a pretty night and day difference. That's the difference of having a chorus that feels like a big chorus versus having something that just kind of feels like an extension of what you were already doing. So if you have a song that is not changing chords a lot or is not dynamically super different in terms of structure and arrangement, adding things like these risers and these hits can make moments feel new and feel special without necessarily changing the core arrangement. The next thing that I want to talk about that you could be doing in your productions to add special moments are highlighting moments with silence. So this is a pretty kind of spacey, big production. It's kind of like atmospheric and ambient. And so if we have any moments where we pull synths out or anything like that, it's going to create a little bit of like notice. So let's look at right here. I'm going to go ahead and turn off my synth bus automation.
I've been getting on with the sunrise. I guess I'll never give you what you need, you say. You're here up.
Right there, I kind of wanted that line to be emphasized a little bit. So all I'm doing is I'm just automating my synth bus down.
I guess I'll never give you what you need, you say. You're here.
Now that little bass slide can shine. That little like high falsetto say ad lib that he does right here can shine. And if we don't have that silence, that moment doesn't feel nearly as special. Same right here in this post-chorus. We have a moment where everything kind of dies out.
Give you the best of me. Do you want the rest of it now? Give you the best of me.
But by automating all of that out, we have a really, really big moment where the tagline of the song, "Do you want the rest of me?" can have its time to shine. Let's check that.
The best of me. Do you want the rest of me now? Give you the best of me. Tell me.
And then there's one more really, really cool example of silence that I want to show you, and that's in the second verse. We kind of use it to transition from moment to moment. Let's see where it is. Yeah, it'll be this one right here.
I wonder what you're doing in your free time. Yeah. If you know why.
Moments like that are going to grab that listener's attention, where if instead we didn't have any of the automation on the reverbs or on the volume or anything like that, it just kind of goes through. Feels really boring.
I wonder what you're doing in your free time. Yeah. If you know.
That doesn't have that same impact that, you know, something like this will. Let me turn all these automations back on and listen to how much more special it feels.
I wonder what you're doing in your free time. Yeah.
So if you're having a production that's using a lot of the same elements over and over and it's kind of looping, adding those areas where you're pulling out moments or you're muting drums for a quarter measure or you're muting synths for a half a measure, that can emphasize vocals, it can emphasize melody, and it can emphasize just structure. So you don't want something that feels pretty amorphous all the way through where it's just like continually doing the same shit. So if you have something that's kind of looped like the song that we have at hand, add those moments of silence so you can really highlight special areas and it keeps the listener's attention. I know when there's a silent moment that comes in super hard after that, I always get really, really pumped. So try using that. The fourth thing that I want to talk about is forming dynamics with processing. And this is particularly in things like turnarounds or transitions. Transitioning out of the first chorus into the second verse, we have all of the synths that I've printed right here. This has no special effects on it. Let's take a listen.
Do you want the rest of me now?
It sounds fine, but it sounds like the verse should be coming in there. And all we're getting is these like vocal chops, which I really, really like. However, we want to make sure that we kind of tell the listener that's not a moment that you should expect the full thing to come back in. So what I like doing is for turnarounds, I'll print all of the synths and stuff together and then I'll process them as a whole. So we're doing quite a bit of processing in RC20 to just really make it dirty, adding a lot of distortion, some bit crushing, some noise. And then we're going to our good old pal Pro Q3 just to do some band passing. So this can feel a little bit smaller and more intimate. And then you could even like automate this width down. If you wanted it to be more narrow, I left it where it's at. But let's go ahead and listen now how this has a slightly different impact versus if we just had it processed normally.
Do you want the rest of me now?
It just has that moment where you can understand that that's not supposed to be a verse, opposed to if it sounded like this. Turn on some of that processing so you don't have all that low end, you don't have all that clarity, and you can understand that that's a transition into the next part. So adding things like that where you're kind of cueing to your listener like, hey, get ready because there's a new verse coming, I think just really, really helps instead of just kind of letting everything be processed the same throughout an entire song. The next thing that I want to talk about that you can do to create special moments is using sound effects that kind of mirror whatever the lyric is doing. You have to be careful about this because sometimes it can be kind of kitschy and corny and it just might not be the vibe that you want. But in this song, he has this line where he's talking about free time, and I love using clocks if I possibly can. I've done other things where I'll use car horns or rev sounds. Just if you can find any kind of Foley or found sound, especially if you want to process that into something unique, I think it adds this cool element where you kind of have this like cinematic scape where it's doing kind of a call and response with a vocal, but it doesn't just sound like you stuck in something super generic and boring just to kind of like have a sound effect that fit, you know? And we do that a lot in like our packs. Like we have Sounds of Life and we have Foley Fix, where we take sounds that we've recorded in our real lives and process them so we can use them in productions. And doing things like this with a clock, I think right here is a cool area that it'll just catch a listener's attention almost every time.
Yeah.
Let me play that with a little bit more run up.
Places on the map that I go. I wonder what you're doing in your free time. Yeah. If you know why I'm late.
Versus, let's take a look at that whole section if we don't have any of that automation or anything like that. Let's take a look if we just have this with none of the ear candy that we've talked about. It's not going to pop the same.
Places on the map that I go. I wonder what you're doing in your free time. If you know.
It doesn't sound, I mean, it sounds fine. It's not like it sounds bad. I just think it's a bit boring. It doesn't really have what I'm looking to do in the mix. So let's turn this automation all back on. Give you one more listen.
I wonder what you're doing in your free time. Yeah. If you know who I'm laying with.
So if you can use cool little sound effects like that, especially in moments of silence or to kind of layer over a vocal, I think that's a really, really cool way that you can use ear candy to create a moment that's going to catch people's attention and be like, oh, cool, that was nice. That was kind of tasteful how they did that. I know there's a bunch of artists that like using Foley and found sound and things like that, But just be careful when you're doing it. You want to make sure that it actually fits the production style and fits the song at hand, and you're not just doing it to throw in something that is kind of a callback to a real life sound. The last thing I want to talk about in this particular video on adding special moments with ear candy is using things like automation or tape stops to kind of cue transitions for that listener. Let's just go ahead and show you this last one. We have tape stop here on the synth bus. It's just by Kilohertz. It's in that Slate All Access bundle that we talk about all the time. Let's go ahead and look at where we're doing this. Also, if you want another video about creating special moments with ear candy, these are just a few kind of basic general examples of things that you could use. But if you want things like this, where I kind of dig into the nitty gritty part of production, where we're not necessarily changing the arrangement, we're not necessarily picking sounds, we're more so just trying to highlight what we already have, let me know, because we can do a lot more stuff like this. Let's take a listen to where we have this kind of tape stop engaged. So we've used it right there to introduce that transition into silence. Where if we don't have that, let's take a listen.
Wonder what you're doing in your free time. Yeah. If you know.
Just sounds a little bit cluttered. It doesn't really have that same pop. So I like using tape stops. They're really, really cool going into a chorus or in some kind of turnaround or transition. I think that they're a really nice way to kind of create some of that. Again, it's kind of like a subconscious expectation that something new is happening. And then let's take a look at things that you could do with like filter automation. So like right here, for example, let's take a listen to how this filter automation can kind of cue up a transition.
West side. I've been going silent on the west side. You already know I'm tongue-tied. I've been getting.
It's something that we do a lot. I didn't do it as a transition out in this, but you definitely could. All right, let's automate in an example so you can see how you could use this to kind of transition out of an element. I didn't necessarily do it in this song, but what I'm gonna do now is just add some filter automation to go straight out of this verse, and then we'll bypass it once we get to the chorus. Let's take a listen how this kind of cues up the listener.
It's probably about the time you tell me goodbye.
Using something like those filter transitions or those tape stops is a cool way to kind of create some of that tension and emphasize some of that impact like we did earlier with the risers and the hits without necessarily adding things to your arrangement or your production. You're more so just kind of enhancing the dynamics. You can do something really similar with like automating width in your verse versus your chorus. That's a little piece of ear candy where people are not necessarily going to hear it or notice it, but they will feel it. A couple other things that we didn't really talk about in this specific video, but that you could keep in mind. I love using percussion fills as little ear candy, like little clicks and pops and little percussive moments that are not necessarily part of the main groove or part of the main swing or anything like that, but they kind of have this nice little bit of like assertiveness of a part. So, you know, for example, I probably could have done something like that in one of these areas where it's a little bit silent.
I wonder what you're doing in your free time. Yeah.
So right there, if I didn't want to pull everything out and have that bass line be the lead, what I could have done is I could have added some kind of little percussion loop right there for that one little bar or half a bar. And it's just something that's only going to happen once. And when the listener hears it, they can get stoked about it. A lot of the time, things like that can accidentally become a hook where you'll see people sing along to these little ear candy elements because they do literally create special moments within something that might have been a little bit stale otherwise. Another thing that you can do is just kind of incorporating little synth hits or guitar licks, little melodies that are not necessarily super important to the arrangement or the structure of the song, but these nice little melodies or counter melodies or even like non-melodic tonal things that just kind of drift off and happen one time, just to kind of emphasize a part where it might need a little bit of extra beef or a little bit of extra attention and care. So hopefully this video helps. Again, these are just some of the ways that you can use ear candy to create special moments. But when you're making your song, feel free to flesh out the song, get your skeleton, get the vocals laid down. But before you start mixing and printing things and calling something a final, see if there are any moments that could use just a little bit of help lifting them or creating impact or creating moments where a special lyric feels special and you give that some space to shine, because that to me is the biggest difference between something that kind of feels like a demo or it feels like it could have been really, really, really good and something that feels perfect and really resonates with me almost every time. So hopefully you liked this video. If you did, make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. If you want to see more stuff like this, let us know in the comments down below. And once again, if you want to support the channel, you can head over to makepopmusic.com where you can check out all of our presets, sample packs, courses. We've got blog posts, we have a podcast. So head over to our website, show us some love over there. Again, that's makepopmusic.com. But that's going to do it for this video. I will see you guys next week. Much love. Peace.